Okay, the first question, how do I define feminist leadership? Now, I got to go to college with Bell Hooks, and Bell Hooks defines feminism as a movement to end sexism, sexist exploitation, and oppression. So, feminist leadership aims to challenge and change patriarchy. Now, most models of leadership are deeply patriarchal. So, feminist leadership must not follow that model. It has to be transformative leadership, leadership with rather than leadership over, leadership that fights to create space for others to lead, especially those denied that space by patriarchy. Second, why is feminism important to leadership in combating global poverty, which is the sector I work in? The marginalization, subjugation, and disempowerment of women is the greatest root cause of hunger and poverty in our world. In impoverished rural areas, the heaviest work burdens fall on women and girls, yet they are denied the information, the education, the freedom of movement, the access to services that they would need to fulfill those responsibilities, and they are denied any voice in the decisions that affect their lives. After the Beijing conference, my organization, the Hunger Project, realized that while our programs were women centered and were supporting the health and nutrition and education of women, we weren't focused on achieving the profound transformation in gender relations that it would require to address the root cause of the problem. We also realized that it would be in the unleashing of the leadership of those very women at the grassroots that would lead this transformation. So, in each region where we work, in Latin America, Asia, Sub Saharan Africa, we needed to identify the highest leverage intervention that could successfully catalyze that transformation in gender relations if we were going to be successful in getting to the root cause of hunger and poverty. So, number three, how does that affect our day to day work? When I saw that question, my first thought was of on March 8th, International Women's Day in 2010, Women Thrive, Nora O'Connell, organized a meeting with the Obama National Security Council people uh, who were working on a presidential study directive on global development. And at this meeting, you had a lot of very smart young women there from Women Thrive, and you had me there, and you had these young, very guys from the National Security Council. And the young women who were speaking were really smart, making really good points, and those guys weren't hearing it. So I realized my job as kind of the old white guy in the room was to say, listen, I don't think you're hearing what these women are saying. They are really speaking to exactly what you need to know for the study directive. So I think we really need to pay attention to them. That was the, really the only contribution I needed to make because all the wisdom was there in the room and it wasn't being heard. There are thousands of ways that feminist leadership needs to be expressed in day to day work life. We realized that our organization had this very macho, long working hours culture, which is frankly sexist. It's certainly not mom friendly for sure. So, creating flexibility, flex time, the ability for people to work remotely, um, all of that is a manifestation of breaking the patriarchy sort of factory mentality of most organizations, even some of the most progressive organizations. Challenges. I would say the number one challenge in being a guy who aspires to achieving feminist goals is to get other guys to think. Almost all women have noticed that you can't message men. You actually have to create an environment that forces them to think through these challenges for themselves. When they do that, they will become feminists. It's actually something I've experienced. We really saw it vividly first as we were trying to train uh, women leaders to provide capacity development for women who are willing to step out as leaders. One of my opportunities was to go to their husbands and say, hey, how has your life gotten better since your wife has stepped forward as a leader in the community? Usually people wouldn't ask them that question. The narrative in their life was, oh, it's a drag. My wife is now doing all this leadership stuff. But the truth is, they had seen dramatic improvements in their life since their wives had become leaders in these very conservative communities. They all had different things to say, but one of the most interesting was that they almost all said in one form or another, for the first time in my life, I've discovered that my wife is also my friend. That is when those power relations were broken and there was more equality in the relationship. The second challenge is that, particularly when guys design programs and those programs don't work for women, their response is, well, let's empower the women to succeed in this program, not let's transform this program to work for women. You know, we had a wonderful uh, program to develop the capacity of volunteer animators, equal numbers of women and men in Bolivia. And when I visited and they were going to organize a meeting of all the animators, only men showed up. And I realized that that was exactly as these men analyzed it. They were trying to get women to do something that would be almost impossible in their overburdened lives. It wasn't working for women, it wasn't going to work, and that they needed to redesign the program, not think that they could somehow redesign women. Positive results. Probably the most dramatic positive result in this redesign of our programs in the Hunger Project post Beijing was with the passage of the 73rd Amendment in India. That had just happened shortly before the conference. And it brought more than 1 million rural women to elective office in one of the most conservative parts of the world. The Hunger Project redesigned its programs to focus on providing capacity development to these elected women so that they could accelerate their journey of leadership. And we've just seen miraculous results from that. These women have gotten schools built, secondary schools built for girls, water brought to their communities, a halt to domestic violence, having rapists prosecuted, and all sorts of issues that men weren't bringing to the table that got brought to the table when women could lead. One of the most exciting recent developments is that those elected women leaders, the majority of whom were illiterate when they were elected, they are now becoming mentors of adolescent girls, encouraging those girls to stay in school, to do whatever it would take to be in secondary school, and then be able to avoid child marriage. Lessons learned. I would say the first is that this is a long haul struggle. I mean, if you look at the history of Susan B. Anthony in this country, in the United States, she began campaigning in 1851, and it wasn't until 1920 that that amendment was ratified. The second is the recognition that probably all of our problems in our world have patriarchy as a root cause. It's not just the subjugation, mistreatment of women, it's the rape of the environment. It's the mindset that says, you know, I'm the big guy, I get to dominate the environment. Similarly, with authoritarianism, the marginalization and denial of rights at the grassroots by these highly top down programs, including the highly top down programs of most international development. So, recognizing how entrenched patriarchy is and the horrors that it has created in our modern world, and then fighting to change that patriarchy, that's the lesson. Thanks for this opportunity.